You should have held on to it. The words landed before Marcus Reed even realized the chair was gone. The soft scrape of wood against polished marble, cutting through the low hum of jazz and quiet conversations, as red wine slipped from the rim of his glass, staining the crisp white tablecloth in a slow, spreading bloom, and for a moment no one moved. Not the waiter frozen mid-step with a silver tray. Not the guests seated beneath the warm chandelier glow. Not even Marcus, who stood there with his fingers still curved where the back of the chair had been just seconds ago, as if the space itself hadn't caught up to what had just happened. And then the laughter came, light, casual, almost polite, the kind that pretends not to notice but still chooses a side, while Ethan Cole adjusted his tailored jacket like nothing unusual had occurred, and Vanessa leaned in close, her voice soft but sharp enough to carry. Honestly, people need to know where they belong at events like this. And the words floated just far enough to reach Marcus without ever directly touching him, the kind of sentence built to dismiss without confrontation, to erase without effort, and still Marcus didn't react. Not the way anyone expected. Not with anger or embarrassment or even surprise. Just a quiet inhale, measured, steady. Like he was grounding himself in something deeper than the room. Deeper than the music. Deeper than the eyes that flickered toward him and then quickly away. Unwilling to linger on discomfort that wasn't theirs to carry. And the light above caught on the rim of his glass as he set it down carefully, deliberately, placing it beside the spreading stain like it still mattered where it rested. Like details still had weight even when people didn't. And when he finally spoke, his voice didn't rise. Didn't shake, didn't demand attention. Simply existed. I was sitting there, calm even, almost quiet enough to miss if you weren't listening. And Ethan let out a small breath that might have been a laugh, might have been annoyance, turning just enough to glance at Marcus without truly seeing him. Yeah, he said, shrugging lightly. Well, you're not now. And a few heads turned away completely this time. Conversations restarting in careful fragments, forks tapping plates, glasses clinking just a little too loudly as the room tried to smooth itself back into normal. But something had shifted, subtle, almost invisible, like a tension in the air that no one acknowledged but everyone felt. And Marcus stood there in that thin space between being noticed and being dismissed, his hand brushing against the edge of the table where the wine continued to spread, dark against white, and for a second his reflection caught in the surface of the glass nearby, distorted by the curve stretched by the light. And he blinked once, slow, steady, as if confirming something to himself. Not about the chair, not about the couple, but about what came next because he didn't move to leave. Didn't step back into the quiet invisibility the room had already assigned him. He simply remained, still as the chandelier light settled across his shoulders, still as the music tried to reclaim the moment, still as the air waited without knowing why, and somewhere near the front of the room a microphone clicked on. Small sound, barely noticeable, but sharp enough to cut through everything else. And Marcus's eyes lifted just slightly, toward the stage as the host cleared his throat. The first hint that the night wasn't unfolding the way anyone thought it would. The microphone clicked again, sharper this time, and the low hum of conversation thinned into something fragile, like glass about to crack as Marcus Reed remained exactly where he was, not reclaiming the chair, not stepping away, simply standing with that same quiet stillness that made people unsure whether to look at him or past him. And around him the room tried to recover its rhythm. A waiter finally setting down a tray with a soft clink, a couple near the window resuming a conversation in hushed tones. But the energy had shifted, uneven now, like a song slightly off-tempo, and Marcus felt it in the small details. The way eyes lingered a fraction longer before turning away. The way Ethan Cole leaned back in the chair with a little more force than necessary, claiming the space with his posture, while Vanessa adjusted her bracelet, her smile returning but thinner now, less certain, as if something unspoken had brushed against the surface of the evening and refused to leave, and Marcus glanced once at the table, at the spreading stain that had begun to slow, its edges softening into the fabric, and he reached for a napkin, pressing it down gently, not rushing, not reacting, just containing what he could, the motion precise, almost practiced, like someone used to managing what spills without drawing attention to it. And the overhead light caught the faint wear on his cuffs, the subtle crease in his jacket, details that most people in the room would notice only to dismiss, to categorize, to move on from. And yet there was something about the way he held himself that did not match the assumptions forming around him. Something steady, grounded, as if he was not waiting for permission to belong, but simply choosing to remain. And across the table, Ethan glanced at him again, this time with a flicker of curiosity mixed with irritation, like a question he did not want to ask, while Vanessa leaned closer, her voice lowered but still edged with that same quiet dismissal. They really need better guest screening for events like this. And Marcus heard it. Of course he did. The words not loud but clear enough. And still he did not respond, did not shift, only lifted his gaze toward the front of the room as the host stepped fully into the light, adjusting the microphone with a small, practiced motion, the kind that signals a transition everyone is expected to follow. And the music faded just enough to make space, not fully gone, but distant now, like it was stepping aside for something else, something more important. And Marcus felt the subtle pull of attention redirecting, the room aligning itself toward the stage, conversations dissolving into silence, chairs turning, bodies angling forward. And for the first time since the chair had been taken, the focus began to move away from the small moment at the table toward something larger, something unfolding. And Marcus straightened slightly, not dramatically, just enough to settle into himself, his shoulders easing back, his hands resting at his sides, and there was a calm in that movement, a quiet certainty that did not demand recognition, but carried weight all the same. And Ethan noticed it just for a second, a hesitation in his expression, like he was trying to place something that did not quite fit, while Vanessa followed his glance and then quickly looked away, as if dismissing the feeling before it could take shape. And the host cleared his throat, smiling out over the room with practiced ease, unaware, or perhaps fully aware, of the tension that had just passed through the crowd. And Marcus's eyes remained fixed forward, not on the couple, not on the table, but on the stage, as if whatever came next had already been decided long before the chair was ever moved. The host's smile held for just a second longer before he turned slightly, his gaze scanning the room as if searching for someone specific. And that single motion shifted everything, because now the attention was no longer general. It was directional, narrowing, sharpening. And Marcus Reed felt it land without needing to look around, a subtle awareness moving through him like a quiet confirmation, while the room followed the host's eyes almost instinctively, heads turning one after another in a slow wave of curiosity. And Ethan Cole felt it too, that shift, that strange pull that made him sit up straighter, his fingers tightening slightly against the edge of the table, as if grounding himself in something suddenly uncertain, while Vanessa's posture stiffened just enough to betray the unease she had not felt moments ago, her earlier confidence thinning into something more fragile, more watchful. And the host lifted the microphone closer, his voice lowering just a fraction, drawing the room in tighter. "Some people do not announce themselves," he said, pausing again, letting the words settle into the quiet. "They do not demand recognition. They do not need to." And Marcus remained still, his shoulders relaxed, his expression unchanged, but there was a steadiness there now that felt different. Not passive, not invisible, but grounded, anchored in something that did not depend on the room's approval. And a few guests near the front began to shift in their seats, exchanging glances, small whispers forming and dissolving as realization hovered just out of reach. And Ethan followed the line of sight again, this time more deliberately, his eyes moving across the room before landing, almost reluctantly, back on Marcus. And for the first time there was hesitation there, a flicker of something that did not align with the certainty he had carried just minutes ago. While Vanessa's gaze followed, slower, more cautious, as if she was piecing together something she did not want to fully understand. And the host took a small step forward, the light catching his face as he spoke again. "They sit quietly," he continued. "They observe, they wait, and when the moment comes, they do not need to prove anything, because the impact has already been made." And the words seemed to echo in the space between the stage and the tables, connecting dots that had been scattered across the evening. And Marcus felt the room begin to see him differently, not all at once, not completely, but enough to shift the weight of their attention, enough to turn curiosity into focus. and a man at a nearby table leaned toward his companion, whispering something quick, his eyes still fixed on Marcus, while another guest subtly straightened in their seat, as if preparing for something unexpected, and Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in the quiet tension of uncertainty, the kind that comes when a situation no longer follows the script you believed in. And Vanessa adjusted her bracelet again, slower this time, her movements more deliberate, as if buying herself a moment to process what was unfolding. And Marcus finally shifted his weight just slightly, not stepping forward yet, not claiming the space, but no longer blending into the background either. And that small movement drew more eyes, more attention, until the room seemed to hold its breath collectively, suspended in that fragile moment before truth fully reveals itself. And the host smiled again, this time with clarity, with certainty, as he lifted his hand in a subtle gesture toward the crowd, toward a single point within it, toward Marcus, and began the next sentence that would change everything. The host's hand remained lifted, steady, deliberate, and when he finally spoke, the room seemed to tighten around every word. "Tonight," he said, his voice clear and measured, "we recognize the man whose belief turned an idea into reality." And the silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was expectant, heavy with anticipation as every gaze fixed forward, and Marcus Reed felt it settle over him like a quiet weight. Familiar, not overwhelming, just present. While across the table, Ethan Cole's posture shifted again, his confidence no longer effortless, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to reconcile something that did not align with what he thought he knew. And Vanessa's fingers stilled against her bracelet, her earlier composure slipping into a stillness that felt more like restraint than control. And the host took a small step forward, his gaze now unmistakably directed. "A man who does not seek attention," he continued, "but whose impact speaks louder than any introduction." And a subtle murmur moved through the crowd, not loud, not disruptive, just enough to signal that recognition was beginning to form, that pieces were connecting in real time. And Marcus did not move yet. His shoulders relaxed, his expression unchanged, but there was a quiet readiness in the way he stood, as if he had already accepted the moment before it arrived. And Ethan glanced around briefly, as if searching for confirmation from someone else. Anyone else? But the room offered none. Only reflections of the same realization beginning to surface in every face. And Vanessa's gaze returned to Marcus, slower this time, more deliberate, her eyes tracing details she had dismissed before. The fit of his jacket, the calm in his stance, the absence of reaction where she had expected discomfort. And something in her expression shifted, subtle but undeniable. And the host lifted the microphone slightly higher, his voice carrying with quiet authority. "The lead investor behind this entire project," he said. And the words landed with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation, no space for doubt. And for a brief second the room held completely still, as if even the air had paused to absorb it. And then the shift happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Heads turning fully now, eyes locking onto Marcus with a focus that had not been there before. And Ethan's breath caught just enough to register, his gaze snapping back to Marcus with a sharpness that betrayed the sudden collapse of his earlier certainty. While Vanessa's posture straightened, her shoulders drawing back as if trying to regain something that had already slipped. And Marcus finally moved, not hurried, not hesitant, just a single step forward that carried more weight than any reaction could have. And the light caught him differently now, not because it had changed, but because the room had. And the same suit, the same quiet presence, now held a significance no one could ignore. And the chair at the table remained where it was, occupied, but suddenly irrelevant. As Marcus stepped away from it without a glance, his attention fixed ahead. And the distance between him and the stage felt shorter than it had moments ago, as if the path had always been his, simply unseen until now. And behind him Ethan remained seated, unmoving, his hand still resting on the edge of the table where he had claimed the space. But the ownership of that moment had already shifted, already dissolved. And Vanessa's eyes followed Marcus with a quiet intensity, the kind that comes from realizing too late what had been in front of you all along. And the room began to stir again, not with noise, but with recognition, the kind that does not need to be spoken to be understood. as Marcus Reed walked forward into the light that had been waiting for him from the very beginning. The sound of Marcus Reed's footsteps was almost imperceptible against the polished floor, yet in the silence it carried, measured and unhurried, each step landing with a quiet certainty that drew every eye in the room toward him. And the space he crossed felt different now, no longer the background of someone unnoticed, but a path being acknowledged in real time, while the chandelier light followed him in soft reflections across the marble, catching the subtle texture of his jacket, the steady line of his shoulders, and the calm in his expression that had not changed from the moment his seat was taken. And behind him the table remained frozen in contrast. Ethan Cole still seated but no longer relaxed, his posture rigid now. His fingers curled slightly against the edge as if holding on to something that had already slipped away. And Vanessa sat beside him, her gaze fixed forward, not daring to meet his eyes, not daring to look back at Marcus again, her earlier confidence replaced by a quiet stillness that felt heavier than any reaction. And the murmur that had briefly stirred through the room faded completely, replaced by a silence that felt intentional, almost respectful, as Marcus reached the base of the stage and paused, not out of hesitation, but as if allowing the moment to settle into place. And the host stepped forward with a small nod, extending a hand in greeting, his expression open, welcoming, but also aware of the shift that had just unfolded, and Marcus accepted the gesture with a brief, firm handshake. No extra movement, no unnecessary display, just acknowledgement. And as he stepped into the light, the room seemed to adjust again. The same people, the same setting, but everything now seen through a different lens. And Marcus turned slightly, facing the audience, his gaze moving across the room not to search but to take in. And for a brief second it passed over the table where Ethan and Vanessa sat, not lingering, not avoiding, just including them in the same calm awareness as everyone else. And that brief moment was enough to make Ethan lower his eyes, enough to make Vanessa shift in her seat, their earlier actions now sitting heavier than before, not because of what had been said, but because of what had been revealed. And the host stepped aside just enough to give Marcus the space. The microphone held ready but not yet offered, as if even this part of the moment belonged to him to define. And Marcus stood there in the quiet, the light steady, the room waiting, and he did not rush to speak, did not fill the silence immediately, instead letting it exist, letting it stretch just long enough for everyone to feel it, to sit in it, to recognize what had changed without a single word needing to explain it. And in that pause there was no tension left, only clarity, the kind that settles slowly but completely, and Marcus finally reached for the microphone. His movement simple, deliberate, his expression still calm, but there was something else there now. Not pride, not triumph, just a quiet presence that carried its own weight. And as he looked out over the room one more time, the space that had once overlooked him now held his full attention, and the difference was unmistakable. Marcus Reed held the microphone for a moment before speaking, his fingers steady around it, his breath even. And when his voice finally came, it was calm, grounded, carrying through the room without force. "Thank you," he said, simple, direct. The kind of word that usually passes unnoticed, but now seemed to settle into every corner of the space. And no one moved, no one interrupted, the silence holding as if the room itself understood that this was not just another speech, not just another name on a program. And Marcus's gaze moved slowly across the audience, not searching, not judging, just acknowledging. And there was something in that look that made people sit a little straighter, made them feel seen in a way that was quiet but undeniable. And he continued, "I have been in rooms like this before," his voice steady, measured. "And I have also been in rooms where no one noticed I was there." And a subtle shift moved through the crowd, a recognition, a reflection, and Ethan Cole felt it more sharply than most, his posture tightening as the words settled heavier than he expected, while Vanessa's hands rested still in her lap, her earlier composure replaced by a focus that did not allow her to look away. And Marcus paused briefly, not for effect, but as if giving the moment space to breathe, and then he went on. "Both experiences teach you something," he said, his tone unchanged. "One teaches you how to be seen. The other teaches you how to see." And the room remained quiet, deeply quiet now, the kind of silence that listens. And Marcus shifted his weight slightly, his presence steady under the light. "Tonight is not about recognition for me," he continued. "It is about what we choose to value when no one is watching." And the words landed differently, not as a statement, but as something closer to a mirror. And a few guests lowered their eyes. Others remained still, absorbing, and Ethan's gaze dropped to the table in front of him, to the faint stain still visible against the white cloth, and for the first time the image connected fully, the moment replaying with a clarity he could not ignore, while Vanessa's expression softened, not into comfort, but into something more reflective, more aware, and Marcus let the silence return once more, not filling it, not rushing past it, just allowing it to exist. And when he spoke again, his voice carried the same calm weight. "Respect is not given by position," he said. "It is revealed by behavior." And the words settled firmly, leaving no room for misunderstanding. And Marcus's gaze moved once more across the room. Briefly, evenly, and again it passed over Ethan and Vanessa, not lingering, not accusing, just including them in the same quiet truth as everyone else. And that was enough. Enough to make Ethan exhale slowly. Enough to make Vanessa lower her eyes, and Marcus finished simply, "Thank you for being here." His tone unchanged, his presence steady. And as he lowered the microphone, the room did not react immediately. No applause yet, no movement, just a pause. A collective stillness as the weight of what had been said settled fully into place. Deeper than sound, deeper than expectation, leaving behind something that could not be easily dismissed. For a moment after Marcus lowered the microphone, nothing happened. The silence stretching just a second longer than expected, thick and complete, until a single pair of hands began to clap from somewhere near the front. Slow at first, deliberate, and then another joined and another, until the sound built into a steady wave that filled the room. Not loud or explosive, but full, genuine, carrying a weight that felt different from routine applause. And Marcus inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement, not lingering in the spotlight, not drawing it out, just accepting the moment as it was before stepping back from the microphone. His movements calm, unhurried, as if the attention did not change anything about who he was, and the host returned to his side with a quiet smile, offering a brief word that did not carry beyond the stage. And Marcus nodded once before turning away from the light, stepping down from the platform with the same measured pace he had walked up. And as he moved back into the room, the space seemed to shift again, not with tension this time, but with awareness. Conversation still paused, eyes following him not out of curiosity now, but recognition, and the path he walked opened naturally, guests stepping aside without being asked, creating space without thinking about it. And Marcus did not look for it, did not acknowledge it directly. He simply walked, his gaze steady, his posture unchanged, until he reached the table once more, the same place where everything had shifted. And Ethan Cole rose to his feet before Marcus even stopped, the movement quick, almost abrupt, as if driven by something he had not fully processed yet. And Vanessa stood as well, slower, more composed, but her expression no longer carried the ease it had earlier. And for a brief moment, none of them spoke. The distance between them small but filled with everything that had just unfolded. And Ethan cleared his throat slightly, his voice lower than before, stripped of its earlier certainty. "I think we owe you an apology," he said. The words careful, deliberate, not rehearsed but necessary. And Marcus met his gaze, calm, steady, giving him the space to finish without interruption, while Vanessa added quietly, "We did not realize," her sentence trailing just enough to reveal its incompleteness, because realization had come too late to prevent anything. And Marcus held their gaze for a moment, not long, not intense, just enough to acknowledge what was being offered. And then he gave a small nod, neither dismissive nor accepting in any grand way, just simple, human, and he spoke, his voice as even as it had been on the stage. "It is not about realizing," he said. "It is about how you treat someone before you do." And the words landed softly but firmly, leaving no room for argument. And Ethan's shoulders lowered slightly, the weight of it settling in, while Vanessa's eyes dropped for a brief second before lifting again. Quieter now, more aware, and Marcus reached for the chair, the same chair, his chair, and pulled it back with a smooth, Controlled motion, the sound softer this time, almost unnoticeable against the low return of music beginning somewhere in the background. And he sat down without hesitation, without ceremony, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if this was simply where he had always been meant to be. And the room around them slowly resumed its rhythm, conversations returning in low tones, glasses lifting again. But something remained changed, something subtle but lasting, and at that table in that quiet space, the difference between who had been seen and who had been overlooked no longer existed in the same way. The music returned in soft layers, low and distant, blending into the quiet rhythm of conversations rebuilding themselves across the room. But something beneath it all remained different, something that did not fade as easily as sound. And Marcus Reed sat at the table with a calm that had never left him, his hands resting lightly near the edge, his posture unchanged, as if the shift that had just taken place belonged more to the room than to him. And the faint mark of red wine still lingered against the white cloth, softened now, less visible but not entirely gone, like a reminder that moments do not disappear. They settle, they absorb into the space around them. And Ethan Cole glanced at it once more before looking away, his expression quieter, his movements more measured as he reached for his glass, no longer claiming space but occupying it carefully. While Vanessa adjusted her seat slightly, her posture aligned, her voice lowered when she spoke again, not out of fear but awareness, and the conversations at nearby tables carried on, yet with a different tone, less performative, more grounded, as if something unseen had leveled the room in a way no announcement could have achieved. And Marcus lifted his glass, not to toast, not to draw attention, simply to take a sip, the motion small, natural, part of the evening as it continued. And the light above reflected softly along the rim, steady, unchanged. And across the room a few guests still glanced his way, not out of curiosity now, but recognition, the kind that lingers quietly, and Marcus did not respond to it, did not acknowledge it outwardly, because nothing about him had shifted to meet their perception. He had not grown into the moment. He had always been there. Only now they saw it, and the chair beneath him remained the same place it had been from the beginning. No longer contested, no longer symbolic, just a chair, and yet the space around it felt different, fuller, grounded in something that could not be undone, and Ethan leaned back slightly, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since the realization, a slow exhale leaving him as he looked forward. Not at Marcus, not at Vanessa, just ahead, processing, while Vanessa followed his gaze, her expression composed but thoughtful, as if carrying the weight of something she would remember long after the night ended. And Marcus set his glass down with a soft, almost inaudible touch, his eyes moving briefly across the room once more, taking in the quiet return of normalcy, the clink of glassware, the murmur of voices, the gentle rise and fall of the evening finding its balance again. And there was no triumph in his expression, no trace of satisfaction, only a calm presence that remained unchanged by recognition or disregard. And as the camera of attention that had once fixed on him slowly dispersed, the room settling back into itself, the true shift revealed itself, not in the way people looked at Marcus, but in the way they now looked at one another, more careful, more aware, and in that quiet, almost invisible change, something deeper than acknowledgement had taken place, something that did not need to be spoken, did not need to be repeated, because it existed in the space between actions and understanding. And Marcus Reed remained exactly who he had been from the start, seated in the same place, under the same light, while the world around him finally caught up to what had always been there,